Welcome into the Inside Bassmaster Podcast. This is the Christmas episode, the Christmas week episode, just a few days until you get up underneath your Christmas tree and unwrap all your new bladed jigs and topwaters that you're going to be using in a couple months, Kyle. And welcome into the podcast. I'm Ronnie, your host, and my co-host, as always, Kyle Jessie in Birmingham. I know you're going to be traveling over the next couple of days to Arkansas, though, so be safe in the cold weather. But it is almost time for a new year, and so we've got like 2 or 3 weeks to continue to recap and remember and revisit 2022, because it seems like when we hit January, we're just going to be previewing and talking about the expectations for the next couple events that are going to start just in a few weeks. So it's good to sit here and remember stuff with you, especially around Christmas time. But how have you been, man? I know it's been real busy wrapping up the end of the year and everybody taking breaks.
For sure. Like you said, this is basically the time of the year where everybody, including myself, realizes that they haven't taken any time off during the year, and you've got all these hours to use, so you better use them. That's kind of what I've been doing the last few days. I've had some work for writing for the magazine and stuff like that, but I've been just literally at home doing almost nothing for the last several days. But you made a good point there, and I feel like a lot of our Bassmaster fans and like family they're very similar in this regard, but like Christmas and fishing, bass fishing goes so hand in hand for me. Like growing up, like getting like a rod or a reel or baits, or like bass fishing has always been a part of every Christmas I think I've ever had. And then also, like like you mentioned, it's going to be really cold here coming up, but the good thing about it is like having this time off. This is usually the time of year I get to fish the most. Like this 2 week stretch is like when I fish by far the most. I might not be doing a whole lot of catching, but like you got the time off. Like you said, I'll be driving back to Hot Springs, and you can bet that I'll be fishing Lake Hamilton and Lake Washita over the next week and a half or so.
The only noise that's on the lake this time of the year, because like you said, yeah, like this was the time that I got to fish as well, and it's like it's dead quiet on the lake. There's no boats running around. The woods is quiet except for a squirrel or two, and it's like you're just cranking a plug around or you're just popping a jig around, and all of a sudden you're like, that's a bite, and you catch one. You're like, hey, I didn't zero today, and that's like your solace for the day. It's like, hey, I caught one. And so no, I feel you on that. And before we get started in the podcast, I wanted to address all of what the Elite Series anglers do. They're so worn down when it comes to September, and they're so ready to be done. I mean, from July to September, they're like, I can't wait for the season to be done. And then we got to hear from these goobers 1 week after the season's done, like, ready to get back at it. No, you are not. We need this little bit of break. And so, like you said, you're wrapped up some stuff and you've been able to hang out. And I've got to do a couple fonts and edits, just small things today and tomorrow, roughly. Well, when this podcast comes out is tomorrow, so it's obviously a Thursday and Friday. Got to wrap up a few things for some Fox shows that'll air in January and February, and then we get to take about 10 days off before we got to think about some more stuff January 1st. So I'm excited for the break and the time off as well. I got to go to breakfast with my girls this morning, but I did want to address that the anglers, I love them, but they like to gain fan favor, and they want the fans to know that they love their job and they can't wait to get fishing. But then they let us know that the season goes too far into the year and we need to do this and that. So the break is needed, though.
Every time I see somebody, I'm like, exactly what you said, post and say I'm getting the itch to get back out there and things of that nature. I'm like, dude, pump the brakes. Like we'll be in July and August, like here in this next season, and everybody's gonna be like, God, I can't wait to go hunting. I can't wait to go do this. Blah blah blah. Like, I don't want to hear it about let's being ready. Like, let's get to the next calendar year, and then we can talk about being ready to get back out there. And that's the thing too, is these guys have so much going on this time of year, wrapping up sponsors, getting their boats ready, getting their boats rigged. I mean, this time of year, I talked to a few guys last week for a piece I'm writing in the magazine, and they were all saying the same thing, just like it's just hectic right now trying to get everything prepared. So it's like, let's take it one step at a time, boys. Like, I mean, let's not get ahead of ourselves yet.
I want to rewind it 2 years to 2020 when we had our last event at Lake Fork, like the first week of November. And then we started 2021, like the second week of February, first week of February. We're like, we got exactly 2 months to invite Elite Series rookies, get them all jerseys and boats wrapped. Some guys didn't even switch rigs and they just kept the same rig because with all the supply stuff, the ability to actually get equipment is very, I mean, we saw less sponsor turnover. It was like, hey, you know what? I hate you as a sponsor and we're still rolling together because I got no other time to get anybody else. We're going to be sponsors forever. But
well, that's what's funny too. Is that season, the last Elite was November, but the last event, like the last Open, was in December, like
oh
first or
yeah.
second week of December.
Yeah.
So like some of those guys had literally
Merry
like
Christmas, you're on the Elites.
basically had like a full month to figure out everything. Like that's crazy, man. That was a wild time for sure.
Yeah, and so obviously I liked it because we didn't have enough time at JM and B.A.S. to take on other projects. We were saying no to stuff because we didn't have time to recap the stuff and to go and do other stuff. And so our Decembers were a lot less hectic, but now there's a lot more going into it. So, well, in this episode of the podcast, Kyle, I wanted to talk to you about some of your favorite moments from the year. 2022, there's a lot of tournaments. We did a lot more live tournaments than before, spent a lot more time on the water. You covered a lot of events in person and got to see it, and you took on a different role as well. Some of these events, I remember going to events and being told that's, what to do. And you got to be kind of the leader of the crew at times and like, hey, this is what we're going to do. You're going to go over here. I'll go here. And so it's a little bit of a different season. And so we got to kind of look at things like you got to look at things eye level from the horizon. And I got to look at things from Google Earth at times in the same event. And so I wanted to talk to you about some moments that stuck out in your mind, some tournaments or specific catches, things like that, that would even grace like a top 5 list, top 5 moments of the year, because there were so many things. I mean, you could go through the 9 Elite Series events and it'd be hard to pick out 5. And then you have the Opens and the College Series and Redfish Cup. There's so many different moments. And then some events are so blowout, awesome events that there are 5 moments within that event that were awesome. And so I wanted to get your perspective on that and some takeaways. But overall, man, it was a very good and very cool 2022, especially with the variety of winners that we saw: young guys, old guys, veterans, newbies, things like that.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, there's always so many storylines and so many things that when you and I discussed this previously, that was kind of my deal. Is I started listing some out, and I'm like, well, these are so specific that like as we get to talking about this, things are gonna pop in my head because you just put it from a real root level. I mean, you're talking about Elite Series events, Classic, obviously went to all those, went to at least 1 or 2 Opens, all the College Series except the championship. So many tournaments and so many moments and things, that you got to enjoy and see, like you said, like basically from point blank. And it was hard to think of the exact ones I wanted to use, but I know for a fact as we get to talking, I'm gonna be like, oh man, like I can't believe I didn't throw that in there. But I am anxious to hear your 5 for sure. And I think some of the ones I have, you're not gonna think of.
For sure. And I think that what's funny is like my honorable mention list could probably be someone's top 5 moments. And like
It's
my
basically
top
like
5 moments will be their honorable mention. Like, like they didn't quite make the cut in some people's minds. And we try to, obviously we're fans of the sport. We like certain anglers because of our past connection with them, or we know stuff about their life and their struggles. And so when we see them break through, it means more to us at times. But this is, mostly objective and just seeing it from a man, I was breaking down the numbers and it was going to be a tough road and it was going to be this or that. And these guys made it through or whatever. So let's try to do a 5-1. We'll go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And obviously, if we mention some more, you can reformulate your list at the end of the show and say, actually, now that we've mentioned 12 things, here's my real 5.
Right.
But for the most part, we'll chat about it. So let me just kick it off with my number 5. And honestly, we could flip this list 1 to 5 and 5 to 1, and I would be totally cool with that as well. But my number 5 kind of moment for the year was Brandon Lester's wins. And it's cool to say it plural, wins. He won the Open to start the year off down at the Kissimmee Chain, his first Bassmaster victory, and then he goes and wins close to home at Pickwick, a place that he had memories with his grandfather and places that he had caught bass early in his life. And so Brandon Lester's 2 victories, very cool. I didn't get to see the first one, obviously, in person because it was the first Open of the year, and I wasn't there for that. But to watch Bass live and his domination, the only angler to catch 20 pounds each of the 4 days of competition, to slam the door in the biggest bag of the tournament on the final day. And we always pray that, like wins are wins, Kyle, but literally you don't want to back into a win. You don't want to have a 10-pound lead and win by 1 pound because you gave it all back. And so to see Brandon Lester just have faith in that spot, it pay off every day, even though he thought maybe this spot might go away. It paid off every day. And then on that final day, he made a move to a spot where fish had been, but they weren't in the tournament. They just had not shown up or they had left. And then he catches like a 6-pounder on a scrounger and a swim bait. And it's like, that's the fist pump, the boom moment. And so for Brandon Lester to see his maturation of 9 years as an Elite Series pro, over $1 million in winnings now an elite and an open champion, one of the best, you could make a claim, the best opens angler of all time based on his check rate and his top 10 rate. I'm surprised he hasn't broken through for more opens victories. And so Brandon Lester's kind of breakthrough year, getting second in angler of the year, pushing Brandon Polinick to the verge and being the only angler all year to make every single cut for the elites and get paid in every one of them. It was Lester's 2022, his wins specifically, but man, it was a coming out party of like, this is a guy, and I said it back in the day when the split happened. I said one of MLF's biggest misses was that they didn't invite Brandon Lester to the BPT. And so seeing him now come to fruition and really just, I can't pick a flaw in his game. And so it's very cool to see him now with the big wins and getting the national exposure he's always deserved. Signature rod lineup as well this year. It's a good year to be Brandon Lester.
No question. That's a good one. I hadn't, that's definitely one of those things I hadn't thought about. But that's certainly one that hearing you talk about it, it's definitely true. And seeing the emotion from his family and everybody when he won at Pickwick, especially. But you talk about a guy like you said that for the longest time now, you're like, this dude's like the model of consistency, but also like can't win. Like he's going to be one of those guys. But then, you could tell there in Florida how much it meant to him just to knock that, get that gorilla off his back to where that was like no longer a thing. But that's certainly a good one. But a lot of mine, as we kind of mentioned, are more like moment specific. So like, before we go into the list, it's no disrespect to any winners, any like whatever. These are just the things that, like stuck out in my head because like, you saying the Lester thing was like, made me think, you know what, like that's probably one I should have had on the list too, because that was definitely but one that really stood out to me, and when I say this, you're going to be like, but didn't he do bad in that tournament? And the answer is yes. But getting to cover Keith Combs on Lake Fork day one of that tournament was like one of the most fun days I've ever had on the water. Not that he just caught him at like some crazy rate. I think he had over 20 pounds. He was in the top 20. Really, really good day. But it's like, growing up, that's like what you like. That's Keith Combs, like doing what he was doing. That's like what I have grown up watching the Zona show, watching, the Elite Series shows. I mean, like Keith Combs fishing offshore, post spawn, deep diving crankbait, like big jig, Carolina rig, like doing all the deal on the place that he's had a storied history of success over the his whole career really, and getting to watch that and see that firsthand. I mean, like at the end of the day, like I'm still a bass fisherman, I'm still an angler, so like getting to see those moments and like watch those things and like learn and just like observe, like those are the things like I'll take with me forever, just getting to see that kind of thing. I don't get to fish enough to actually use it in practicality, but I'll still learn it. But that was definitely one of them. He didn't have a great day too, but getting to watch him day one and like I said, kind of get to see him do his deal. And the reality of it is, like we've talked about it before, but there's usually not a whole lot of tournaments, during the course of a season where you can truly do the offshore like power fishing deal. This year we had 2 of them, but some years we don't have any where you can really do that for the most part. So it was really cool to get to see him do that, and I really enjoyed watching him do that. That was a lot of fun. That's number 5.
I mean, it's kind of like if you got to watch John Cox sight fish, if you got to
Yeah,
watch
yeah, no doubt.
somebody frogging, if you got to watch somebody skipping docks, everybody in their specific like category they're great at. If you're covering Keith Combs and he's throwing the
Powder blue.
chartreuse and powder
Yeah,
blueback crankbait 6XD,
exactly.
then you know like that's like something that we grew up with. I mean, he
Sure.
could throw that in a 1 foot deep pocket, and I think he's going to catch one on it. Like it's just that deal. And so that's funny you say that. And yeah, there's just guys that like even if it doesn't come together, you just have to respect like how much they know about that
Sure.
given thing, And so very cool to see that. Yeah, I don't blame you at all. That's a sentimental moment for sure. I know when I was on the water covering anglers that like were doing well or struggled on that day and their flotilla left, and then they look back and you're still there as the photographer, whether they're having a good, whether you're there and they start to take the lead and you're there experiencing with them, or when everyone leaves and you're still like living it with them, like I'm losing when you lose today, bud, or you're winning and I'm winning, like we're connected. And
Yeah.
so to be there with an angler like that, and especially one that's got history, that's always a cool moment to share, because then you can almost talk, other than their marshal or their camera guy, like, and your boat driver, you can always go up to him and be like, dude, do you remember when you nailed that tree with your crankbait and it exploded, like casting it, whatever it was. And so it's interesting you say that. I like that one. Give me your number 4.
So number 4 is going to be more of a general topic, but I got Jay Shakurit and his season is one thing that I just really, really enjoyed watching and getting to be a part of. Whether you want to specify being, that he won Rookie of the Year or the St. Lawrence tournament, both, like I will categorize those together. But number
And
4
I
is
think
just
top 10 in AOI as well. I think he
yeah,
snuck into
I mean
10th.
just insanely good year. And he's just one of those guys, like, and I think that most everybody would agree with this. Like you spend time around him and you can't help but like him. Like it's not even like you see him on camera and you see him on stage and you're like, this dude's like pretty boring. He's really quiet. Like he's really not. Like in person, like he has a really good sense of humor. He's really fun to be around, and you can just tell he's one of those kids that's just, I say kids. Well, he is younger than us, so he's a kid. He's one of those guys that like you can tell he appreciates it and he like understands it, and like he doesn't take anything for granted, and he's super humble. That's the thing too. Like you could easily be in the position he was in all year, and just be a complete a-hole about it, and like kind of just be arrogant and that kind of thing. And I mean we've seen that. I mean over the course of our lifetime
We
we've
got
been
plenty of those guys for
yeah,
sure.
I mean there's a lot of them. And we don't want to go down that rabbit hole because there's really not many of them at Bass right now.
No, but there's a couple that definitely stick out if we wanted to pick one or two. But no, yeah, I get it. And one thing I'll say about that is that there are a lot of rookies lately that are quiet and like not as personable as people would say. But you got to remember, this is totally new. They're fishing against 100 guys that they've never met before, hardly, unless they're at a, like I call some of these rookies. I'm like, you found anybody you like on the Elite Series? He's like, I hadn't really talked to many people. I'm like, every day of practice or competition at a boat ramp, say hey to somebody. You got to put yourself out there because they got no reason to come meet you. You got to put yourself out there and say hey to one person. So you got to remember that these guys, they've never been in the boat with some of these camera guys before that we have. You see the personable relationships other anglers have. So they've never met the staff. They've only met the staff, 9 events this year. And then obviously their compadres, they don't have a tight-knit group of, veteran guys that took them in. It's very rare to see that. So I will say that I got to give some slack to the new guys every year, because it's like if you just transferred to school your senior year of high school and you don't have any buddies anymore that you travel the opens with, and you're just like, these are new guys. I'm not going to just walk into history class and cut jokes with the quarterback. Like you just don't know them.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's the thing too, is I think one thing that really makes me appreciate Jay as well is he and Alex Redwine's relationship. So those two together are just a very funny pair, like very just bizarre and kind of strange, to be
Bizarre
honest.
is a great word for it, yes.
They're very funny. I mean, I've spent some time around them and I've really enjoyed them collectively. But another thing too about Jay, and when I say this, I don't mean this as like he picked up bass fishing last year and it's some kind of like Cinderella story. But like I'd say for the greater population of bass fishing fans, they didn't know who Jay Shakira was. I mean, that's the reality of it. I mean, like I said, I think most people within the industry kind of like had a good idea because there was plenty of people before the season started that kind of suggested, kind of tapped him and said that's probably going to be one of the guys to watch. But I feel like it should give guys hope. I mean, like, people that are, sub 30 that really want to do this for a living. And there's so many of those guys in the EQs right now that, want to qualify for the elites. And sometimes like this as a goal just seems so high and like seems so unreachable. But to see what Jay was able to do in his first year and, obviously making it to the opens and then having the year that he did, I mean, it should give hope to a lot of the younger guys that are fishing the EQs and things of that nature. Because I mean, at the end of the day, like Jay's one of those guys. He's just a fisherman. Like dude can catch them. Like that's plain and simple. So I think that I would hope that there's enough people out there that have watched Jay seen his approach, seen kind of his demeanor, like and just know that there's something to be learned about that. So yeah, like I said, there's really nothing more to say about that. I just thought that that's an interesting point as well.
Yeah, and you can find your place in the industry without having to yell and scream on fish catches, not doing these different things. And also for guys we put a lot more eyes on the college series now than we ever had before. And to think about, like, there could be a junior in college right now getting his feet under himself as an angler, have a great senior year, and then qualify for the elites his first year out. And people are like, where did he come from? Same thing for Jay Shakira. He goes and wins 2 events as a co-angler on 2 different bodies. Well, I think he won Lay Lake and Grand Lake, maybe Lay Lake and Smith Lake, something like that. And then he goes and qualifies as a boater the next year, and then he makes the elites and then wins one and sets records there. So no, I like that. And I always give, that's why I said I love having so much knowledge of all these anglers, is that when we're sitting there trying to decide who's on camera, what's a good storyline to play off of, like I try to consider the story that's least yelled, the least told story, but that one that could be captivating if we lean into it some. And so some of these quiet guys definitely have some different moments that are memorable to think about. My number 4 moment was to kind of see Austin Felix, Brian Schmidt, and Brock Mosley not have the years that we expect of them. Austin Felix had won Rookie of the Year. He had been top 10 before in points. He had done top 20s and stuff. He had never really slipped up. And this year started off strong, got a top 10 at the St. John's River, and then like seemingly couldn't get above 70th in the next 4 or 5 events. And then he needed to catch him at Pickwick. He needed to catch him at St. Lawrence, Oahe, and Mississippi River, and he did it to make the classic. He wins Oahe, obviously. Same thing for Brian Schmidt. Schmidt just likes to, just like he said on the podcast, he could probably be more consistent. Yeah, he could be more consistent, but he'd have less chances to win events, and he likes to win. And so he saves it till the end of the year and starts to really come on strong, wins Mississippi River, and punches his ticket to get into the classic. But he had done that through points that same week as well. So he went from not being qualified to being doubled in the same 4-day stretch. So very cool to see there. And then also Brock Mosley is a guy who had a lot of pressure on him. I'll say a lot of pressure. I mean, when we were doing our preseason FS1 shows last year, we made a short list of a show about the AOI preview of who we thought could win. And Brock Mosley was on my list to win AOI, possibly, a short list of 5 to 10 guys. And so for him to not perform all season and not really figure it out, that whole household, Tyler Rivette caught him and made the classic. And seemingly Brock Mosley and Hank Cherry had been the stalwarts of the group, helping Tyler out, get his traction on the Elite Series. And now it's to the point where did they help too much, or do they need to go back to figuring out their own stuff, because Tyler's now got his traction, and we saw Brock do it at the end of the year and have some magic to make the classic and had a good performance at the Mississippi River. And Hank obviously missed the classic for the first time in forever. But people really hadn't got to see Hank Cherry at the Expo at the classic in a while since winning 2 classics. So he'll have plenty on his hands at the classic there. But yeah, I think seeing Schmidt, Felix, and Mosley, there were some others probably as well. Scott Martin had to come up at the end of the year and do it, but to see those 3 guys really just be out and then get in right at the end was pretty cool to see that, because I'm like, man, you can't finish worse than 30th this week. You're not going to have enough points at the next one, and then they come through and do it. So very cool to see out of those three guys. Now let's go to number 3. Or do you have anything about that before I let you go, or before we switch?
No, that's a really good point. I mean, I agree. That's really cool seeing guys do that, because I think that gets overlooked sometimes. Being able to, know that a guy has to do so well. It's basically like for people that haven't fished tournaments with points and things like this, it'd be like taking a college class and getting all the way to the final and knowing that you have to have, no doubt, you have to have a 73 or better, or what, yeah, or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I think our more average students, like probably me and you, that we got to the end of some classes and we're like, I gotta have a 92 on this class or this final to pass.
How many points per question is it? Is it 4? I can miss 2. I can miss 2 questions.
And no, like, so
yeah, definitely.
They always seem so like far-fetched, but then you see them do it and you're just like, I'll be dang. And then it just kind of gets swept under the rug. So I like that one. I think that's a really good call on you.
Chad Pipkins has been one that's been known to do that before and make a surge at the end of the year and do that normally with smallmouth, but this year was a little bit different. We had some smallmouth, but we had, a normal smallmouth place. We had a different smallmouth place, and then we had a Mississippi River, which is, it's hard to make up points because people aren't going to bomb, and you really can't just like thrash them. And so, very cool to see. Number 3 for me. So we talked about it at the beginning of the year. We made a list of guys that were to keep an eye out for, a watch list, so to say, for the college series, and we didn't put Louis Minetti on there. And my North Carolina, my North Carolina bias would probably have leaned to UNC Charlotte more so. We have a couple Elite Series pros from there. Like I know those guys seemingly more, but Lewis had fished alone and hadn't had some results that we, probably to get him noticed on the boards. And so to see him do it with Michael Figaro at UNC Charlotte and win Team of the Year, they go to all these locations. Where were they at? Harris Chain, what was it? Lake Norman, Saginaw
Norfolk
Bay, and then Norfolk. Were those the 4? Mm-hmm. And then obviously to do the job and win Team of the Year there, based on the rig that they had as well. An old boat, no electronics hardly. Trolling motor's the only thing propelling that thing. It's aerodynamic just because there's less carpet and less leather on the seats than any other boat. Like the air just goes straight through that boat. To see him do it the old school way. Now, granted, every guy we saw utilizing forward-facing sonar in the bracket got their butts smoked because it was an old school grinder, dock fishing, fall time tournament. And so it didn't necessarily work out for the new school technology guys. And so to see Lewis, though, catch him like he did, and to make the College Classic bracket from Team of the Year, and then to win the bracket. I just edited a bracket TV show that we'll be able to watch in January on FS1. That to see that whole story come to fruition, I mean, this is what all the old school guys that want to flip a jig have prayed for. They wanted this moment. And so to see Lewis now get to take the center stage, represent that school on the Open Series, and to see, I'll say this, Lewis was much quieter throughout the year. I know he's got his big personality, but he is everywhere. Ike Live is tagging him. You got all these other places tagging him. Like he's moving and shaking, and we're getting to see his real true self. And I think that his personality and honesty, his southern flair with his northern roots, like I think he's going to be a good one to represent. I think it's also going to be cool to see his honest assessment of himself. And so for Louis Minetti, that's number 3 for me. Moment of the year was to see his bracket transpire the way it did. And I'll say he knocked out, no one was a slouch in the bracket, but he knocked out maybe the 3 hardest pairings to do, beating Trey Schroeder, who had already been there before in the bracket and has, been very seasoned, to beat Jackson Swisher, one of the brightest young stars who has led Bassmaster Opens in the past, and then to beat Jackson's partner, Seth. He had a gauntlet to go through. I mean, we might not know those guys' names as much, or other people might not, but we will know those other guys that he beat out very soon. I wouldn't doubt if we had a couple pros come from that bracket group.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of that that list, the preseason list, I've already thought about it a good bit, and I'm sure he'll be all for it. But I think we're gonna throw him in the panel to get to pick
That'd be
the
good.
top anglers for this year, because we are gonna do that again. So
Because I'm almost 30, dude. I'm a rad dad now. I'm almost 30. I'm so far disconnected from college at times that I don't even want to put up with their antics sometimes, and I'll just unfollow people just because I just do not want to put up with it. So whereas before, we had to put up with it. So
we'll still keep it the same, but I do want to get his take on that. I think he would really enjoy that, and he would have as good of a an idea of some of the guys up and comers and things of that nature. But yeah. So number three for me, I kind of went back and forth between number three and number two for me, and I'd say they're both pretty similar. But I'm going to go with number three being a real specific moment. But watching Luke Palmer catch the I'm trying to 9-5, a 9-5 from literally the distance between me and the wall behind me is how like close it was. And Luke and I are super close and good buddies, and we talk every day. And he sends me about 49 TikToks a day, so I usually have to rummage through all those. I hope he hears this because that is true.
Luke Palmer, the TikTok star. I did not know that.
But he and I have a really good relationship, and him being obviously from Central Oklahoma versus Central Arkansas, where I'm from, like we know a lot of the same people, a lot of the same things. So we've had a good relationship, and getting to watch him fish that day, it was so funny because we went through hell and back just to find him because there was no service where he was at, and it's obviously just a cypress tree forest over there. And at the time we pull up to him, I can't remember what he had on the total that day, 33 something. I mean, it was just a stupid weight. But when we pulled up to him, he had like 27 or 20, like just 27.
Okay, bad, yeah.
And he's going down there flipping these trees, and he's had a stellar day. So to this point, it's almost like he's just kind of messing around.
Yeah, he's gonna have to have something crazy to call.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna have to be something insane to happen. And he and I are just sitting there talking like me and you are. Like, I mean, just about nonsense. I mean, I don't even think we're like talking about the tournament anymore. Like, we're just talking about like no telling what. And he sets the hook on that fish, and I know the exact rod he was using is a Falcon Amistad, which is like a 7.3 heavy. I mean, it's not a light rod, and that rod literally doubled over all the way basically to the handle, and
turn into an ugly stick real quick.
This is her. And obviously he catches it. And for those watching on YouTube, I'll show you the picture, because that's like I got photos of the whole sequence. And it was just insane. I mean, it was like one of the biggest fish I've ever seen ever. It's definitely would have been my PB had I caught it, not by a ton, but a good bit.
I put it as the number one catch from Santee in our top 10 catches on YouTube. I put it as number one.
And when I watched that, it just brought back all the memories of that. It's nothing I'll ever forget, but I just forgot all like the intricate details. I mean, it was just insane. Like, brings it over to our side of the boat. I mean, lands it. It was like you end up looking at the pictures and you're like, this is like what you would do if you were just doing a photo shoot, like a staged photo shoot. And it happened in a Bassmaster Elite Series tournament, a 9-3 from literally like so close that the lens I was shooting with was almost almost had too much zoom on it. So it was really, really an awesome moment. And it's one that I'll certainly never forget.
You could hear, you guys were just regular volume talking, and I could hear your camera boat driver on Luke's mic. That's a 13-pounder, and Luke's like, maybe 10, but it's probably 9 something. And then you were like, hold on, and then you took the photo. You're like, oh my God, dude. And then he goes in there and he's like, I don't even know which one's the smallest. And he pulls out a 5, and he's like,
literally.
That one, he throws it back.
I've never in my life. I mean, I haven't.
It's like Lee Livesey. Like there's a small gap. It's like you catch 20 pounds, you did something. You catch 25, it's the biggest bag of the tournament. That week, he catches mid 30s or low, within a pound or two of 30, and I can't imagine Lee Livesey's 43-pound day now. Like 10
Oh
more
yeah,
pounds on that.
10 more
Holy
pounds on
smoke.
top of it.
Oh my God.
You can't
Crazy.
even put it into perspective, because I mean, like 99% of bass fishermen will never have that day. Will
No,
never have it. So like you
no.
can't even put it into perspective. But no, as far as that moment goes, that would definitely be one of the best. And it got like a full page feature in one of the magazines. It was
Yeah.
just it was a really cool moment. I mean, it'd been cool, like,
Cover
excuse
photo
me.
Kyle. That's what we call you.
Yeah, right. It had never, it would have been cool regardless who it was, even if it was somebody I had no relationship with, had never talked to. But like, for it to just happen the way it did, like I said, we're just sitting there chatting about like literally nothing, just BSing basically. And then for him to do that, like it was just a surreal moment. It was like, I was texting everybody. I was like, he's literally got like 33 pounds because he was sandbagging. And he tallied it up, and like actually he had me tallied up because he was telling me which each fish weighed, and he was like tally that up, and I literally looked at him and I said 33 pounds. He was like, what? And sure enough, he actually weighed 33 something, I believe. So
It's a funny joke. You can always be at like the boat ramp at the Sabine next year and be like, "Yo, text me if you're close to 33, or if you have a 9-pounder you see on bed, text me and I'll come take
yeah.
photos." It's like you could be on a place that's not possible, and it's a joke now. Like, let me know when you're gonna catch 33 so I can come
Yeah.
over.
Yeah, so that is definitely one of the top moments this year. I could honestly put that at like 1, 2, 3. I mean,
Honestly, yeah.
on the list, but that's pretty good one.
Give me your number 2.
So number two is, in the spirit of college fishing. We were just talking about that. Number two on my list would be getting to watch Bo Browning and Jake Peck win at Norfolk. Um, so that was special for a lot of reasons, but like, I've been really good friends with Bo Browning. We're both from Hot Springs. We fish tournaments together. We're really good friends. Really close with
So
Stephen
much
Brown.
so that he just transferred to your hometown now in Alabama just to
Yeah,
be closer to you.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know if that's true, but it was. It probably was a part of the factor. That I had no part in suggesting that to him,
Recruiting.
but I'm sure it didn't hurt. So yeah, now even here in Alabama, we fish tournaments together. I mean, he and I have just been really close for a long time now, and getting to watch he and Jake pull off the win on Norfolk, which another part of that is special too, just because my grandparents are from the North Arkansas area. I mean, Norfolk, Bull Shoals, the White River Lake chain of lakes are literally my favorite in the world by far. So getting to see them do that there, I was looking forward to going to that tournament just to go back. It's not home for me, but it's like, I mean, it's more or less like it's a
Feels like
second
it.
home. Yeah, no doubt. And be up there, and then for Bo to win the tournament, and then have his parents there and everything, and see their emotion, because obviously how much it means to him. And that's the thing too. So every win is special. I mean, it's special to watch anybody win any level of tournament, but when it's somebody that personally, and how much time and effort they put into being good, a good angler. I mean, he literally fishes all the time, like almost to the point where it's like, it's
Can't keep a
absurd.
girlfriend because he fishes all the time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, it's a problem. But that was definitely one, and like I said, that was another one of those that could be 1, 2, 3, whatever. But that was certainly one of my top moments of the year, and getting to see that in person.
And to hear him talk about wanting to win on the Bassmaster stage, like his dad has won on the Bass stage, and then his dad wanted him to win on the Bass stage as well. Like, it's just Steven's
Sure.
been, for the anglers who left and switched over, Steven's still been so supportive of the Bass brand in terms of the opens, in
No
terms
question.
of the production crew. He's always been tight with the guys here in Little Rock, and I mean, I ran myself up on a shoal at Hamilton and busted my prop and called him, and he brought me a prop, and so it's one of those deals that the Brownings are good people. So, and didn't they, I don't think they blew it out, but for a 2-day event, didn't they win by a couple pounds?
So
I don't know
they
if they
actually
led day one and then
yeah.
yeah.
So it was kind of the same thing we were talking about earlier about having a big lead and kind of just like falling back on it. Like, but it was one of those things. So that was another part that made it special. So day
They almost
one,
busted 20. I think they had like 19 something, right?
yeah, yes. So day one, they had like 19 something. And like I said, Bo wouldn't lie to me. Bo can be deceptive on social media with like his stuff, like
taking a photo
posting
by a
things,
big
like
bridge in the middle of the
just
lake.
nonsense like that nobody believes if you know him, but like most people probably would. And it was ironic because I was actually the writer for that event, which was the only event of the year that I was like the writer versus the photographer. So I was sitting there talking to Jake and Bo, and he told me that they had caught over 150, and I was like, no way. I mean, you didn't catch over 150. That's like one of those, like, that's like an age old thing for fishermen to do is
Like
say you
every
caught
4 minutes, you have to
Yeah,
catch one. Yeah.
dude, I covered them on the water the second day. They easily caught 100. Easily. They caught one every like minute and a half. But they were all like, for the most part, they were not keepers. And then they'd catch a keeper and it'd be a good one. But the second day, it was really interesting to watch the progression of it. So the first day, I don't want to give away too much of the spot, but I mean, it was just like a real specific spot, like an area, like a flat with like, like some high spots on it and stuff. Um, and it was catching them. I mean, I kid you not, you can make the same cast with a different bait. I mean, it didn't even matter. You could throw a mag draft up there, throw a Nico rig. I mean, you name it. They'd catch one almost every cast. But most of them the second day were not keepers, which the first day a lot of them were. Like he said, they caught several limits worth of fish. Well, the second day they pull up there. Like I said, I get to watch all this on the water. They pull up and they catch like two keepers right off the bat. So it's like you kind of know at this point, like as big of a lead as they have, they catch another decent bag, like they're going to be really hard to catch because the White River is another place like you were talking about. Like it'd be hard for somebody to go bust a 26-pound bag on Norfolk. I mean, it's just not going to happen. So he catches those early, and then it just becomes like, I mean, like the most frustrating thing to watch because they really were catching them almost every cast, but none of them were keepers. So you're sitting there like every time one of them swings, which like I said is an insane amount. And they caught less on the second day. So like that's what made me know he wasn't lying. Because like he was like, oh, this is like nothing compared to what it was like yesterday. I was like, hey, how could it be any better than this?
Then you're worried
But no,
about
like he
all of
really
the
had to
100,
work for it.
the 150 that bit yesterday were all keepers, and you're like, what if these are all non-keepers for the rest of the day?
Yeah, you like ran through them. Yeah, yeah. So that was the deal. It's like they just continued to fish it and then they'd give it a rest and this, that, and the other. And like the more the day went on, I mean, you know what that's like. I mean, like the pressure starts building. Like you can act like it doesn't show, you can act like you're not even thinking about it, but if you're human, it's weighing on you. Like, and you could tell it was starting to weigh on those guys because it was like, getting later in the day, like basically to the afternoon, and they still had 2 or 3 keepers in the boat. And then the very end, they were able to catch 2 nice keepers, and then they only won by like, I don't know, a pound or two. Like their winning margin was not nearly as much as you would have guessed, but you could tell, those guys sitting at the tanks. I mean, like they were just nervous. I mean, I could tell he was
Sweating.
about to throw up. Like, I mean, he was just not in a good place. But that was definitely one of those things that I'll cherish, and I'm glad that I was there for getting to see his first win on college Bassmaster. And I know you gave him a hard time because it was like about time. Like I mean
Oh yeah, he had
he's a
been.
special
Yeah,
talent. He's gotten close, and it's kind of just one of those deals, like a matter of time before he actually put a win together.
yeah, it's from being a co-angler on the opens to being a pro in the opens to being a college angler now. Like he's done it all backwards. He did it like Shane LaHue. Shane LaHue fished
Yeah,
the tour as a co-angler before he ever fished college, and then this should be easier for you. You should have won already. And
yeah,
so,
yeah.
but no, it is a deal. And I'll say you watch out for him. He'll be on the short list, obviously, for guys next year for college. But his partner, Drake Sturgill, if you don't know him, he has been taught and not born and raised, but about as close as you can get to blood with Hank Cherry in the Carolinas. And so if you don't know his name and he came from the Lake Norman region, he's been trained. So let's just say that 2 guys in the boat have been trained by pros. One was their dad, and one was basically their godfather, basically with Hank and Drake. So that'll be
Right.
interesting to see that pair come together at Montevallo. My number 2, you mentioned him earlier. He was lower in your list. I'm not gonna tell him that. He can watch the podcast and find out who thought his moment was better. But 100 pounds for smallmouth, man, something that had never happened for 4 days, in a pro level tournament. Yes, probably if you did a Sturgeon Bay tournament for 4 days, you probably catch 100. Same thing. the weather being perfect, it being of all the times we've gone to the St. Lawrence, I was the least optimistic and the most pessimistic about this one. July, it's immediate post-spawn, not even thinking. Every year it's like, will they break 100? Not even thinking about 100 this year. I wasn't even considering it. Then we go and have really rough weather, and I'm like, man, this one's gonna be a flip-flop do or die tournament with these guys who found something to practice, who didn't. Each day it's gonna be different, whatever. And then that weather looked like it was getting better and better, and it slicked off for all 4 days of the tournament basically. And they were able to just catch them and catch them and catch them, and to break 100 pounds and to have a special spot for Jay Shakir like that. Very, very cool to see Corey Johnson catch 29 pounds on the final day of the tournament to make up for his misfalls on day threes, which day threes have bit the Johnstons the last couple of years at the St. Lawrence when they haven't won. And so to see the big bags that came out of that, it was one of those deals where someone was like, yeah, I caught 20 and I decided to lay off and save them for tomorrow. And then I ended up being in 61st place. And it's like that. The only time we had seen 20-pound bags extend that far down at the St. Lawrence was the college series when the water was high and it was during the spawn and 85 teams had 20 pounds or more. We had 62 Elite Series pros doing it on their own with 20 pounds or more. I mean, absolutely crazy to see how good they caught him. And so for Jay to be just steady Eddie, quiet, staying at the top of the leaderboard the whole week, I was waiting for the sharks to come and bite the minnow, and the minnow just kept swimming away. And now we know that the minnow is basically a shark himself. So that you never really know what a win does for someone, but when it's something special like a century mark, which we had 8 different occurrences of 100 pounds this year, that's crazy. To see Jay win it with 100 pounds, to get his first elite win, to become the youngest Elite Series winner of all time, breaking a record that had been around for over a decade and a half, basically. And then also the opportunities that came out of that, shooting, shows with Mark Zona and Strike King Pro Team Journals. And now, like, you go to dinner and people ask you your opinion on something. That's when you start to make it as a pro. Like, it's not like these guys are talking and you're listening. They'll be like, dude, what do? You're over there at the Sturgeon Bay region, whatever. And so very cool to see Jay do that and accomplish everything he did that week. So number 2 for me was we can exhale. I got no expectations for this year's St. Lawrence. If we go catch 85 and we go catch 100, whatever, we caught 100 pounds of smallmouth for 4 days for an Elite Series event at St. Lawrence. Yeah. We don't have to do anything else there. Like we did it. It's happened. And to see Jay be the one to do that was pretty cool. And to see a Johnston, they put a lot of effort into that place and they kind of put it on the map, at different times. And so to see them also be able to prosper from that was good. So number 2 was Jay Shakir. Now, my number 1, I haven't heard you mention it, and it might be on your honorable mention list, but my number 1 moment of the year was the entire week, even the weeks leading up to it, but that entire just bubble surrounding the Bassmaster Classic this year and Jason Christie specifically. I edited the show. It's our classic weigh-in show for FS1. You'll be able to watch it in January. But to go back and relive that, and it's fresh on my mind now, for someone who is unshakable and unflappable and just one of the most intense and just best anglers in the world, top 5, no doubt, Jason Christie, you could see how much it has bothered him that he's given up leads in the Classic and that he hasn't won a Classic. He's got 4 top 10s in the Classic, and all 4 of those events he led, either was in the lead or was in the top 5 almost every day of all of those events, and hadn't won a Classic yet. To win that Classic at Hartwell, a place he had won before, a place that he had given up a Classic win before on the final day, to do it his style as well, and I'll get to that in just a second, but I'll say this year I got to be the guy, I had been joining in. Yeah, I jump around, after weigh-ins. I'm with Zona and Tommy and Davey in the green room, and we're interviewing these guys and asking them questions, and they tell us some stuff, and then they leave, and we get the next contender, and we kind of get our notes for the next day of live. Well, this year I did that, but I was on the other side of the spectrum. I was in the interview room where we were shooting the interviews on camera. So there were things I had to ask for my knowledge, but things that I needed them to also say. And for me to put Jason Christie and Gerald Swindle and Greg Hackney and some of these guys' feet to the fire with tough questions, and they handled them well, they answered them well, it meant a lot to Jason Christie. He did have unfinished business, no matter how corny that sounds or whatever. Like he had unfinished business. He's one of the best in the world. He needed to get that classic win though, and to really solidify other things. And so to ask him those questions behind the scenes and even the other special moments, getting to ride with him the final day of practice. He took me from the boat ramp at Green Pond to that creek where he was, forward facing sonar, picking off fish with his FF sonar minnow, like seeing what recipes he had to, you could give me all the recipes for the best cake in the world and I'm probably going to mess it up. It's not going to taste as great. You give Jason Christie a couple key recipes and he can take a crumb and make a sandwich. Like some anglers take a sandwich and they turn it into a crumb. He can take a crumb, make it into a sandwich. And so to see him go catch a few fish in that creek and think this is something I could do. And he was going there on the final day of practice to cancel it. I'm not going to go here. I'm going to go cancel it. And it ends up being a starting spot and the spot he leaned on every single day to catch at least one to three weighed fish. Then he transitions to his dock bite. And the one thing I told people at the Night of Champions that night, which is always after the final day of practice, we rush back to Greenville, get dressed, and go to dinner for the Night of Champions. People were asking me, how'd Christie do? And I said, if he can get his timing right, I remember saying this 100 times, if he can get his timing right from when he leaves that creek to go to his docks, he can win the Classic. And I said timing because we left that creek on the final day of official practice and we ran around for 3 to 4 hours from 8 o'clock to noon, didn't get a bite on a dock. And then he pulls into a pocket in an area that he was trying to cancel out, which he ended up canceling it out anyways, but it told him something. He goes into the pocket and says, I'm going to catch a fish on one of these docks right here. And there's like 2 or 3 docks. He goes and catches a fish on each of the next 4 docks. And I was like, you didn't just call your shot. I mean, you went and said, I'm gonna go 4 for 4 and they're all, extra base hits. And so to see that whole week was very cool. I was looking back through the weigh-in thing, and when he gets in the boat and starts his drive around, we're all taking photos. We got the fans are gated in and stuff. And I just I pointed at him and he looked down. I just stuck my fist out and he gave me knuckles. And it's one of those deals that we had talked in multiple interviews each day. I had been in the boat with him to see what he was doing. We got to cover him do it live. And we did not know if he was going to win still when he entered the arena at the end of the day on the final day. Like there's 3 guys who could win this event. And we hadn't really had a classic like that in a while. And so to see that was cool. And then I'll say the last thing was, he left his classic trophy on his boat to go do the interviews in the decompression room and stuff. And I was like, I mean, there's a bunch of all chaos kind of break. Security is going to be tight, but they're going to be a lot less tight at the end of the tournament. And there's just random people walking around. I'm like, somebody's going to take this trophy and they got a classic trophy. And so I just took the trophy and was like, I'm just going to follow him everywhere he goes because he didn't take his trophy. So I'm just going to make sure he has it with him. And to follow him around. And then later that night, I guess I'm just going to say everyone did the drunk check and no one wanted to take Jason Christie 10 miles across town to go get his truck and boat. And so we piled all of his family and friends into my rental car and he's got the classic trophy. And the first thing he does, he opens the door, they get in, they shut the door. And I'm like, everybody good? Everybody good. Okay. And I'm about to drive us. And he says, you didn't think I won the classic, did you? And I was like, dude, you can't drop that on me. So it was cool to see his personality and to just see Jason Christie be the best in the world, be a laid back guy, and to really, when something matters to someone who's accomplished so much, it's important. And so that was a big week for him. And it was a big week to just be around it. I felt like I grew as a professional handling myself around him that week. It was very cool.
Yeah, no question. It was certainly all classics are special and every one is special for whoever wins it. But that was definitely one of those that, you got to see him basically fight off his demons, from coming so close so many times. And, I mean, yeah, I mean, I can't say it any better than you did, but that was certainly a an awesome thing to see. And I didn't get to cover him on the water, but it's one of those deals where you just were just in awe of watching him do his thing and finally come out on top. But
Especially when mid-morning, oh, he only catches one keeper out of that place and then it's gone. And
here we
he's
go.
like, like, yeah, here it goes. And I was like, just go put your dock, just go put all your eggs in your dock basket, bro. And like I think his cameraman Jake Latondra said, bro, you've only weighed in one or two from this creek anyways. It doesn't matter if you leave here with a limit. You only weigh in one or two. You just now need those other fish. And to also see his last second catch, the last 20 minutes of the day, he catches his last fish to cull up. I bet it was by 5 ounces. I bet it was a 5-ounce cull at least. I saw the beam, goes like that. And he wins by that, but he sets the hook under a dock and that fish just like does the tail walk towards him. The one time you don't want it to, and it goes and it's all up in the cable and he's got to go up there and grab the cable and reach over and grab the fish and try to get it in the boat. And he does. And what he did, he put his jig on his rod, clicks it and puts it in the box because that line was trashed, but it got the fish in the boat. And so to see all that different things happen was very interesting. Plus, because I remembered the ride back in the 2018 Classic, we had a camera in every guy's truck. So we had the dead silence, deafening nature of Jason Christie. And I remember they were saying he's got all those the little floss sticks up in his, like the dash flip down deal, the visor. And just, I can remember being in the truck with him almost with the camera and all the guys. Like, we didn't know if Jordan won. We didn't know if Christie won. We didn't know if Edwin won. We didn't know who won. And we had cameras in all their trucks, just the dead silence that just rips a soul out. And I was like, this is a different tone singing too. And so it's very cool to see that.
Yeah, no question. My number one is also going to be from that classic. And the classic in general, you could literally just put it, if we did this every year for like, our Christmas episode, you could probably just put the classic as like number one. But I'll go a little more specific on top of, seeing Christy pull it out. Getting to be with Stetson Blaylock the last day of the classic was definitely something that of the whole year, like, favorite photos, favorite moments, favorite, you basically name it. It's basically my favorite, like it's like my favorite like 4 hours of like the entire year probably. So obviously starts making a really, a charge. It'd been like in the later morning, mid-morning.
Yeah. Started in 6th, fought like 3-pound, heavy 3 pounds back.
Yeah. And I'm covering Lee Livesey to start with that morning, and he's in good spirits, like real laid back, like like Lee always is, and he's not catching them. So I literally am like, I'm sitting here looking at Stetson Blaylock just like climbing.
5-pounder, 5-pounder.
Like,
He's coming soon.
We don't have anybody with him. Like, somebody needs to be like getting this. So I tell or ask Steve Bowman, one of the two, can't remember, like what do you think? And he's like, yeah, go for it. Like, we need that story to be told. And go over there, and he pulls up literally the I guess it'd been like the second place he comes to, and I don't, there's so many like factors of this whole like I said 4 or 5 hour stretch. But like, I remember pulling up, and you've seen On the Water Classics, of course, but like, you pull up and there's 1,000 boats sitting there watching him. And it's like, it's just not really my nature to like get up in front of everybody and basically give everybody the double birds. It's like, hey, this is my deal. Like,
you're the bouncer. You got to be the separator.
Yeah, right. Like, but at the same point, like, it's kind of a mixture between like, I have to do my job and shoot photos. Like, I have to be like in good position to do that. And two, like, you kind of almost take on the responsibility, at least I do, like, to be like the sheepdog and make sure these guys don't like get too close. And Stetson's super laid back. He didn't really care. I don't even think he was even really thinking about it. But still, in my head, I'm just like, God, like, some of these people are getting too close. Like, it's just a cluster. Like, we're making this more difficult for him. And he pulls in that pocket at the first place he's fishing. When I pull up, is fishing like an island. He catches a couple there, nothing that like calls up, but like, you can tell he's getting a lot of bites. Pulls into a pocket and immediately goes to skipping a wacky worm Nico rig around these docks. And part of what makes
dock, I think it was like one dock. It was his first dock he fished all day.
There was 2 or 3 before that one. That
Okay.
he like it was all in the same pocket. It was probably you're probably right. It was probably the same time first time he fished a dock, but like he fished one little pocket. It was a shallower pocket, and he fished the docks on the left side, like 2 or 3 of them. He actually caught one, like real small one, like I mean, not even a keeper. Then he goes around the pocket, and the first dock he fishes on the right side of the pocket is where he catches the giant, like the second 5-pounder. But just like that whole moment, like it was crazy because I ended up messaging Stetson's wife back and forth during the day because she was wanting updates and stuff, which was really awesome. But it was one of those things. Like Stetson's obviously an Arkansas guy from Benton, which is literally right up the road from Hot Springs. It's literally splits the difference between where you live and where I'm from. I grew up fishing tournaments against Stetson. Like I can remember being like, junior high school kid, and like Stetson Blaylock shows up to the New Year's Day tournament, which I hope he doesn't this year because I'm going to take his money. But I can remember him pulling, every time you'd see Stetson Blaylock, it'd just be like a surreal, like I'm fishing a tournament against Stetson Blaylock. Like that's a stud. Like he's a stud. Like dude's a stick. So like to see that full circle, like from doing that as like a kid, and when I say kid, like I wouldn't say like a little kid, but like I said, middle school to like high school
Yeah,
age.
14, 15, 16.
And
Yeah,
then
for sure.
and then getting to cover him in the classic, and like outside of Christie making like the surge there late in the day, I mean that was the moment. That was the magical part. Like every classic, like there's always going to be like that magic that happens for somebody, and like it's either magic or it's tragic. Like, and I just thought of that in my head. Like I've never heard that before, but it's one of the two. Like for Matt Airy the year before, it was tragic. Like loses the big fish, like potentially loses the classic off of that. Like it's one of the two. And Stetson catches that giant, and it's just like I can visualize the whole sequence, not because I got like photos of it, but just because like I can visualize every part of it. It's like he went into like a state of shock for about 5 seconds or more, like to where like I don't think he understood. Like it's like you can't even register what's going on. Like it's just so insane.
And then the iconic, like
Yeah,
he's
like
holding it and he's
uh,
yeah.
it was just insane, like being there and being the closest person to him, and like just the roar of like the people behind. I mean, it was like that was one of those things. Like I could do this for a really long time, and I'm not sure I'll ever get to be a part of something that like on so many levels meant so much. Like once again, like if it was anybody like in that situation, it would have meant a lot. But for it to be Stetson, who's by far the closest, elite angler to where I'm from and grew up fishing. I mean, it's my dad still fishes some of the Rusty Hook tournaments in Hot Springs area that he'll fish. Like he'll fish just for fun sometimes.
Him and his brother Keaton. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So like that's the thing. Like it's just like it meant so much to watch him like have that day. And I can even remember, I kid you not, the doc before he caught that one, he looked over and he said something to me. He or Hunter Lindsay, his camera guy, said something. And I asked him, I said, I bet you've never done this on Hamilton, have you? And he laughed because Hamilton's nothing but docks. It's just docks everywhere. And like doing exactly what he was doing is like a real thing. And he started laughing. He said, man, I haven't been to Hamilton in a while. And then like one of his next casts is the one that he catches, that big one. It's just like, I don't know. I mean, it's like, I get like giddy talking about it because just the whole moment, the whole entire sequence of like how everything happened was just insane. And like, I'll never forget it. Like it's one of those things. Like everybody in the top 10 or in the top 5 that had a good chance, you were like you'd be happy for any of them to win. But like it's like what you were saying, you get that like connection with the guy you're covering, and like whether it's somebody you know well or not, like you almost just internally start rooting for him because you're like, well, this is my assignment. Like this is my guy. I might as well root for him. But like going into it, Stetson, like you said, not a whole lot of people had him on their radar. To like, you can't predict.
And
a day
he had
like
finished. He had finished second at Hartwell in an elite event just 2 years, 3 years ago. And so it's not like he's bad at this place. He's great at it. And another thing that was different was he was throwing him and Mark Frazier were throwing a dang red crankbait like it was ultra pre-spawn, and it was like something nobody else was doing. And then he transitioned obviously over to the Nico rig for a few fish. But that kind of goes into the whole my story about Jason not thinking that I or saying that I didn't think he was going to win the classic. I thought Stetson had it won. He caught like a 3-pounder on his final cast, makes a call. Robbie Floyd's in the boat, does the interview, and he's running in. He's got the biggest bag of the tournament. I'm like, ain't no way he didn't just win. And you got 3 anglers within 11 ounces, or whatever it is.
It was just insane. And like you said, I know we had him on for the post classic podcast, which was awesome. And I kind of forgot about it until you just mentioned it there. That was what was insane, is like he literally was fishing like 3 or 4 different patterns all at the same time. I mean, like you said, like pre-spawn with like the shallow running red crankbait, like skipping a wacky rig around like they're spawning, which like where he caught him,
facing sonar and stuff as well.
It wasn't necessarily like like flat, like it was just fishing docks,
It's
similar
just the
to like
nearest cover in a spawning
like,
pocket. Yeah,
very similar. But like, and then you fishing way out deep, like you said, with forward facing sonar with like a drop shot, or like I don't even know what he was throwing. I was too far away to tell. But
that's like Hartwell. That's what you got to do. You got to be different every day.
It was crazy. It was like there were so many patterns going on, and I remember we talked about this to him, during that podcast. Was like, I think most anglers get in a kind of a rut where you get so narrow-minded on one thing, but on certain lakes like Hartwell and stuff, it goes to prove like not every fish in the lake is doing the same thing. Which, I mean, you could get off on a whole separate tangent about that. I mean, like, like whatever your deal is or whatever you're comfortable with, like, just because like other people are doing other things, like do what you have confidence in. And that's like, he was able to do all those things. And it seemed like no matter which one he picked up, like which pattern he wanted to do, he would catch them. And it was just like, it was just a crazy day, a crazy thing. I mean, like, I just remember it because like people, ended up seeing the photos. Like I went straight back to the ramp after he caught that big one and worked up that gallery. And I know
you
put
texted
him on,
it to me. Yeah.
It's like, yeah. And it was just
cow.
like, it was just one of those things. It's like, and like, you're basically like shaking like a leaf because you can't even like believe that just happened. And then like, from my perspective, like just take the fishing aspect out of it out, take like, that's my job, is to be out there and get like the best content I can. And then like get basically the photos of my lifetime. Just like,
not too bad day at work.
Just happened to be like in the right place at the right time and get like just like basically the moment of the classic to that point. It was like, oh my God, like I cannot believe that just happened.
And then you zoom out a little bit more. It's like you take your phone and you do the extra wide thing where it backs up a little bit more and you're like, how old are you? 25, 26?
26. Yeah.
I am 26 years old taking photos on the water for Bassmaster in the final day of the classic on a guy who could win it. What am I doing here? Like it goes back to that level. You're not only just doing your job 100%. And your job is to take photos. It's like, how did I even get here? You're like, what? How are we even here? This is amazing.
You're exactly right. And that's literally like when I was texting Stetson's wife, that was like the exact conversation we were having. I was like, I'm not trying to make this about me whatsoever. Cause like every text we were sending was like, I'd update her like, hey, cold a little bit.
Of course. And she's like, hey, I'm going to throw up.
Yeah, yeah. But like, it was just like crazy. That's why I told her, I said, like, just to be here watching Stetson, like all those things that we talked about previously, like the Arkansas connection and like just being literally like 20 minutes away from each other, 30 minutes away. Like all those things, and then watching him like was potentially going to win the classic. At that moment, there was like no doubt until Christie made his surge. But it was just like one of those things. It's like full circle. You're like, wow, like how? Like I'm doing this. Like this is like my job. Like it's crazy,
and I'm killing it today.
Yeah, right.
It's very cool. I'm glad you picked a classic one because I always know one of my other things that I do at the end of the tournament is when they do the Super Six, I go sit in the crowd and I watch the Super Six video and I get to watch the first few people. Sure. And then at the end, I have to corral the 2 wives, first and second place wife, the guy who's got to weigh in last and the lady who's, in the hot seat. And so I had to sit there and was near Lynn. I was like a triangle between Shanna, who was with Jason Christie, Hunter for Kyle Welcher, and then Lindsay for Stetson Blaylock. I was like in a triangle between the 3 of them. And every time someone would weigh in, they would I felt their eyes like staring at me. And, and I had to wait to see the Welcher weigh in. So I knew if I was taking Hunter and, if I was taking Hunter and Shanna, or if I was taking Lindsay and Shanna, but I knew I had to take Shanna because she was the last one to weigh in. Jason was. And so whenever it happened, I like went down and said, Hunter, it's time. And I went and got Shanna, and Shanna was shocked she thought that Jason had no shot of winning because I hadn't seen her in like 30 minutes. But I was like, oh, I had to come get you.
Yeah.
And we had to run down through the basement of the arena to get around the stage so that they can walk out with the flowers, because they're the wife that won the classic, or the special other. And so it was very, very hectic, especially with all the ladies like, do you think he won? I'm like, somebody won. I don't know. I literally don't know. I watched every moment. I don't know.
No, yeah.
Well, you said that a couple things might spark some other thoughts, and so I'm going to throw out a few honorable mentions that I thought of as well, or have had just tucked away. And I think that John Cruz's win at the beginning of the year, winning over a decade after his first win, being an original lead angler, being an industry innovator. He dropped a video on his social media the other day about his 5 favorite baits that he's designed. He's designed over 30 baits in the industry between missile baits and Spro. And so he dropped his 5 favorites. And so to see a guy who had been in the industry for so long, as a supporter of the sport and a consumer in terms of being a pro,
Sure.
to see him get a win over a decade later, and a place that he had been pretty good at, his 3 of his last 4 finishes there have been in the top 5. And the one year that he didn't, he had told us that he was really sick and was drained and wasn't himself that week. So if he would have told me that, I'd taken him off a fantasy team. You got to let me know that stuff, John. But yeah, 3 top 5s in the last 4 events there at the St. John's for John Cruz. Getting that win, that was cool, especially because he also knows media. He gets it. He's one that's super easy to work with. And it's really great to get his candid thoughts about it. I mean, he shot a podcast with us for 45 minutes while he was practicing on the Harris chain, trolling through a creek. Oh, there's one on the bed. And so that was cool. I'll also say Keith Combs at the buzzer. I mean, you're going into the 4th quarter down by 10. He started the final day in 7th place at Rayburn, which is his home place. It's so hard to win at home. He goes into the final day with a shot, but I mean, people had caught 5 pounds and people had caught 31 pounds. And I mean, it wasn't easy. And for Combs to go and catch him on the final day and to win and make the classic, he deserves it, because he had been the first man out of the classic like 2 years in a row, and he hadn't gotten a win lately. He hadn't really showed out on Lake Fork like we thought. He hadn't really shown up at certain times, and we were like, man, it's good to see Keith Combs do it on live and be back. Keith Combs is back. So now we get to see him at Knoxville. Those were 2 other things that I thought about.
Literally going back to the example that we were saying earlier, that'd be like you having to make 100% on your final at the end of the year. I mean, you couldn't miss.
You gotta win. Yeah.
You have to win. Those moments, I mean, that's a really good one. I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that those are some of the most underrated moments in bass fishing. And it's not that they don't get publicized, but it's like, if you're a tournament angler, you understand how like nearly impossible it is just
the
to
pressure
win
on you. Yeah,
just to win on command. I mean, like, just to win at all, but then like no choice but to win.
Yeah,
like Polnick when he won after being disqualified in the Mississippi River, like those types of moments, like those are like so improbable that like I don't think you could like overstate those moments enough, because it's like, I mean, like, just knowing that you have no choice but to win, regardless home lake or not, like anywhere. But even like you said, like the pressure of it being your home lake, it's like, that's so unlikely. And then to do it is like, holy crap, he actually did it.
Yeah. And because we always say it in the opens now, if you have we used to say if you had a bad tournament, you can't make the elites. Now it's like you have a bad day, you can't make the elites. Yeah. Most of the time now, you can't have a bad hour and hope to win, an open. And for him to know that, and it was so do or die. I mean, the lake is the 3rd lowest it had been in the last 15 years. Combs had said, he's like, I don't know, it's just drought. It's so low, takes a lot of places out of play. And he goes and finds some old stuff that helped him and some new stuff that helped him. He went and threw it up shallow in the end of the day to call up each day. Very impressive. And I always wonder how much he can say some buzzwords like brush pile and 6XD, chartreuse powder blue. You can say those things and you like trust and believe in him. But then to see him go out and do it, and really what he had spoke to on the phone with me, he followed through and had done it. So that was very cool. I'll say JT Tompkins, 20 years old, winning an open, coming from 9th place. that was crazy, especially when he was down by like 7-11. He was down by like over 8, almost 8 pounds from the leader
Right.
going into the final day, and he came all the way from 9th to win that. That was such a crazy event, with Trey Swindle's DQ happening, with Pete Glusek falling in the water, with Chris Boudry giving up a big lead, JT Tompkins catching a big bag. I was like, holy crap, what is going on? And so definitely a cool moment was that Open. But yeah, there's a lot of things that happened this year. And I mean, I also, one of my underrated moments, and I guess you can say his whole year was a moment, but Kenta Kimura finished 69th in points his rookie year on the elites or something like that, out of 90 guys or whatever it was. And
Right.
then to get top 20 in points this year. And I think with like 3 events left in the season, he had the same points than he had his whole first year. Like, he had 391 points and was 69th in points, and 3 events left, he had 390 points. And I was like, Kenta is on fire, and he did it in the Opens as well. He busted their mouths and like got 4 top 10s or something, and had the chance. All right, no, he did win an Open. He won the James River. So
He would like to have a
huge
conversation
year
about
for Kenta.
the best Opens anglers of all time. You mentioned that. I said he would like to be mentioned in that conversation because he's definitely one of those guys.
Yeah.
That would
So
have
those
to
are a
be.
couple.
Yeah.
Those are a couple things for sure. I think that
I feel like would be remiss as well to. I'll let you finish your thought, but I got a thought after.
No, I just you try to think about things that like you take for granted. Like, we knew Drew Cook was going to win an event, especially sight fishing. We just didn't know if it was St. John's, Harris Chain, Santee. You just didn't know, but you knew he'd win one. And then
I
Christie
feel
to
like
go another win. Like, you could just go through all the elites and think like,
yeah.
blah 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 blah, century mark, whatever. But like, there's
Would
some
be
key
remiss
moments that happen.
not to mention Polnick winning his second AOY. Obviously, we haven't even brought that up yet. But like the way, yeah, it's one of those deals where it's like almost similar to me, and I don't mean this in any disrespect. This is
Because
more
you're
of
so good.
a compliment. Yeah, those guys are so good that it's not like those guys. I don't even know what you're talking about, but like those guys are so good that it's not surprising when they do things like that, just because you almost become to expect them. Like Christie winning the Classic, like it was an awesome moment. It was like one that one of the all-time classics, but it's like you knew in your heart, like eventually he was going to win one. Like you don't get that close, and I mean he always steps up to the plate and always has good events. Like eventually he's going to win one. Like he's been too close so many times. Like he's going to do it. And then like Polnick winning, like but the way he won, like that last event, basically like having no adversity as far as like finishes until the last 2 events of the tournament. Or 2 events, excuse me, of the season, have a bad event in Hawaii where you would think, Brandon Polnick, smallmouth, like go ahead and put it on lock. He's the angler of the year. Then stumbles there, and then goes to the Mississippi River. And on day 2, like you're like an hour left, you're like, he's not even going to catch a limit, and he's not going to make the final day. And Brandon Lester's going to win this, or Chris Johnson, one of the two, is going to win this. And like after all season of it being like, oh, this is like one of the most dominating years of all time for angle of the year, and then for him to go on and like I said, leave the door wide open, and then like all these improbable things have to happen, right? It almost goes back to the same thing we were talking about with like Combs. Okay, you look at it and I don't remember the numbers exactly, but it's like Brandon Lester has to finish 5th or better to have a chance. Like all tournament he's sitting in like the top 10. You're like,
Yeah.
like no freaking way. Like what? Like it's like the most improbable. And that was like maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but it was like top
No, for
12 or
sure.
whatever he had to be to even have a chance. And then where's he sitting in the top 10? You're like, are you kidding me right now?
He is
like, there's
pushing
no way
him
this
to
is actually happening.
he is
Like they're
it's
both
like
up there.
it's like Stetson's post classic interview when he's idling in with Robbie Floyd, and he's like, whether I get 5th or 6th or I get 2nd place, it's been a great week. I did all I can do, and I pushed them to the limit. I hope I pushed them to the limit. Lester and Chris Johnson pushed Polnick to the limit. And I'll say this because we always see the end result and we say, well, hindsight. If Brandon Polnick misses the cut, or if Brandon Polnick finishes 44th and Lester has to get a top 5 to win the AOY, Lester's going to fish day 4 differently than he did probably. But when it was kind of defined, Polnick won AOY, we crowned him the champion of that. Lester just could go out and bust him, and he goes and moves from 10th to 4th. If there's pressure on Brandon Lester and he's got to get a certain up, you just don't know if he's going to fish the same way, if he's going to tighten up a little, or if this is his making moment. You just don't know. And so I always like to put that in perspective. Like, just remember, every day, every catch affects the next one. You go 3 hours without catching one, Kyle, you might be a mental mess, and I might be a mental mess, and somebody else can be calm as a cucumber. We just don't know how they're going to handle the adversity or the next thing. And so, yeah, for them to push each other like they did, I mean, very, very cool. I'd be remiss if I also didn't mention Larry Nixon coming to the Elite Series. I think that's a cool moment, and it's earned because he's a legend and he won 2 AOYs and a classic. So he's done his job in the past for that requirement, but he basically just had to fish an open and say, hey, I'm ready to come back. I'm ready to come if you guys would have me. And now he's on the Elite Series as a legend. I think that's very cool. Also kudos to Cooper Gallant and all the guys who qualified, but it's very cool to see Cooper Gallant because he's the only guy who's qualified for the Elite Series that I remember covering when he was in high school. Like,
Sure.
I know all these guys who've made it through the Elites, Drew Cook, Jake Whitaker, Patrick Walters, and I met them and knew them in college. I did not know anybody else in high school. And to cover Cooper Gallant in 2015 at Kentucky Lake as the only Canadian team at the championship, and he was just a little blonde-headed kid fishing with a little dark-headed kid, and then literally he's now a grown man, almost won an Open last year, wins an Open this year, and makes the Elite Series. And to see his, like, I mean, I feel like everyone was quiet on Cooper Gallant, and then he started to get some traction, and everyone just like blew their sails of like promotion. Like, they're just like, this is the new guy, this is the guy. And we're all kind of hesitant until they prove themselves, and he has definitely done that. So kudos to him. We're gonna have some great anglers. We got some stories of Alex Wetherell. He's fished the Opens for 6 to 8 years or whatever it is, and he breaks through. You have another Japanese angler coming in. You got a guy like Kyle Norsetter. He was 10th. He had to finish 9th or better to make the elites in the final day at Rayburn. He goes and finishes 3rd to get it done. Logan Latuso had been close. There's so many guys. Joey Cifuentes coming over from another pro circuit to be able to come and fish. There's a lot of, and him being like neighbors with Larry Nixon, and the timing of that couldn't have been any better for those two. So I'll say it was a very, very fun year. And kudos to Keith Poche for winning Opens Angler of the Year, fishing all 9 Opens and balancing another pro schedule as well. That's a lot of miles, and he's going to do two pro leagues next year. And so he better have the right boat hooked up for which tournament he's going to, since you can only pick one for the elites and stuff. So we'll see how that goes. But really a great year. A lot of big things have happened, and we just wanted to reflect on that in this episode of the podcast.
No, I have enjoyed the conversation. I hope our listeners will as well. There was definitely some good conversation there and bring up some good memories. And I assume a lot of those memories will be great memories to end the year on, for 2022. And yeah, of course, like we've said, basically every podcast for the last 3 or 4, we're looking forward to next year. And the next time we do this, it'll be next year, I imagine, or right about it.
Yeah,
so,
it'd be close. It'd be close for sure.
Very close.
Well, last thing before I let you go, what is something that you got for Christmas? Could be fishing related, but what's like an all-time thing that you remember getting, at Christmas time? My family's a little different. And that's probably why I'm terrible at it too. My parents tried to always make it special, but it was for the most part from when I was like 11 to like leaving the house, it was just me and my parents. My older brother had already left the house, and so it was just simple. We had steak dinners at Thanksgiving and Christmas. We didn't have turkey and ham. We didn't do all that garbage meat. We just did good dinners. And our gifts, we didn't wait and do all these gifts at Christmas. If we wanted something in August, we got it in August. Like I tell Sarah now, like, we work way too hard for you to wait till December to get something when everything's out of stock and nothing's getting shipped and weather's preventing. Like, just buy it when you want it and we'll be good. So I didn't have too many Christmases where there was like a ton of stuff under the tree, and man, we really blew it out this year. But in gosh, when was it? Like 2009, something like that. I did the patented oh, it's another shirt box, because my mom wrapped everything in white, in paper in a white box. I'm like, oh, it's another freaking shirt. And now I'm like, can you get me underwears and shirts? Like that's what I need as an adult. And like, as a kid, I was like, this is dumb. I open up the shirt box and it has a man, I don't know what my thing said, but it had a tag and it had keys, and it was for my neighbor's red Ford F-250, old school, just a big, I mean, it was like a extra long bed, had a diamond plate tonneau cover. It was a single, bench seat. It had 2 gas tanks on it. Everything was diamond plate and chrome. And then the truck was red, had the lights on the top. I mean, I got a truck for Christmas 7 months before I could even drive it. So I drove up and down my like neighborhood road because we were out in the country. And so I drove up and down that. I put it in the garage out in the backyard. I'd wash it every week, and I never drove it, but I washed it and I took care of it. And I really would say it's not fishing related, but that was a gift that kind of got me out. It got me out of the house. It got me with opportunities to go to ponds. I remember how many times I put my rods and reels in the tonneau cover, shut it, go to school. And after school, I head to a pond on the way home and fish until my parents, were headed home from work and I needed to go do the dishes real quick, and escape back home. So that would be my favorite Christmas gift. Do you have one that was kind of, memorable for you all these years?
I don't really have one specific Christmas gift. I mean, most of them, like I said earlier, are fishing related. I can remember a lot of the rods and reels and things like that I got. I was actually telling this story the other day. So not too long after Skeet Reese won the Classic on the Red River, I was like just the biggest Skeet Reese fan of all time.
Bald
And I
Skeet. That was
bought,
Bald Skeet.
so one summer I saved up, yes, yeah. So one whole summer I saved up all my money I could. I think I've probably told you this before. And I bought his signature series Skeet Reese reel. Like it was an Abu Garcia. I still have it. I literally could go walk into the room next to me and grab it. But it's black and all the trimmings and everything are yellow. Like the side to where the spool's that's yellow. I mean, it's a slick looking reel. Like, it's still to me like one of the coolest looking reels on the market. And they made that after he won the Classic, but before he won, like right as he won the Classic, he won the Classic on I remember everything. It was a Lama Glass rod that he was throwing a crank or a spinnerbait on. Which was like back then that was still a thing. I was like using a fiberglass composite rod with a spinnerbait, and some old school guys might do that still, but now you've got like Jason Christie and guys throwing on like a 610 extra heavy or whatever the heck he throws. But I remember for that Christmas, the following year I got a Revo winch, which was like their crankbait. It's like a 5-4-1. I still have that reel. And I got it wasn't a Lama glass, but I got like a Daiwa
and now
glass,
you realize now you realize it's like a 5-4-1 is like the slowest reel in the market, and you're like, holy cow.
I still yeah, it's one of those reels like for crankbait fishing, it's fantastic. For anything else,
oh yeah, well, back then you probably caught fish on a chatterbait and a spinnerbait and Texas Strait. You didn't even care about ratio, and now we're like psyched out about it.
Yeah, it didn't matter. Now I can flip with an 8-to-1 and flip, and then I can flip with a 7-5-1, and I can tell how inefficient I'm being because of how much less line. I'm not even kidding. It's insane. But anyway, so there was a pond. My neighbors, which are like good family friends of ours growing up, they dug out and built a pond, and they never stocked it with fish. Like never stocked it. Their plan was like eventually to do that, but like their 2 daughters were like my age and my brother's age. Like, so we're, like I said, all like very good family friends. So I walked down there with that rod and reel to this pond that allegedly has no fish in it. And I start like acting like I'm like fishing the Classic, and I'm like talking to myself and like, dude, I like did that all the time as a kid. And I'm down there like throwing a spinnerbait or whatever I'm doing, and I get a bite in this pond that allegedly has no fish. I'm just like, what was that? Like,
I'm the best in the world.
There's no way. And then sure enough, I caught a fish in that pond. And I still to this day I don't really know how the fish got in there because I never stocked it. But like, there's all sorts of stories about like getting like the herons and the cranes and stuff, like bring the eggs over and like
Poop them out or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's no telling. I mean, it could have been anything. But sure enough, like in the span of like a couple of years, that place actually had some fish in it. Wasn't like a lot, but like you could go catch like a fish or two if you went and fished it hard enough.
So you
So
use that combo to catch a fish in a mud hole pond that had no bass in it. So you
yeah,
were exactly the spitting image of Skeet Reese on the Red
Red
River.
River. Yeah, yeah,
Not a
exactly.
bass.
Exactly. So that's one of the fishing memories that I'll always have. There's plenty of other
Oh my gosh. That's
Christmas
funny.
memories, but that was certainly one of them. Like I literally just went down there just to cast, just to act. Like I said that I'm like fishing in the classic or whatever. And then go down there and actually get a bite, catch one. I'm just like, oh my god, what is happening?
I remember catching one of my biggest fish of all time, which isn't I've never caught a 7-pounder. I've caught a bunch of sixes and a lot of them in tournaments, but my first ever 6-pounder that I caught was in a pond around this time of the year, snow on the ground. And I mean, I'm trying not to slip and fall in this pond that's down the street from the house on a spinner bait, and it's freaking cold as can be, and it's a 6-pounder, and I'm like, is there a bucket that I could take this to my dad and show him, because I don't have like a phone or FaceTime? Like, I
Yeah,
mean, I have a
right.
phone, but I got no way of like instantly showing him. And I think I can see like all the old photos on my iCloud of like just terrible, like trying to hold the fish out and take a photo. It's
Yeah.
like a chartreuse and blue and orange spinnerbait Terminator, or whatever. But because those were the ones I couldn't break, so that was great. I needed baits I
All right.
couldn't break.
Yeah, 100%,
Well,
100%. But
well, Kyle, all the safe travel and prayers for you and Caitlin going back home. I'm in Little Rock and we'll be here for the next couple of weeks. Um, Best wishes to you there. Be safe. Hope you have a Merry Christmas. Appreciate another podcast episode. And for all you at home tuning in and watching, we appreciate your support. 2023 for the Inside Bassmaster Podcast is going to be big. We got a lot of things in store. And hopefully we just more and more fishing conversation comes out of this. I know there's a bunch of podcasts out there and we don't have to be your favorite, but we try to bring a candid, real, honest assessment of different things and some fun as well. We're just two kids, honestly. I guess for at least 7 more months, I'm still a kid if I'm in my 20s, but we're just two kids enjoying our careers in a sport that we love. And so I'm glad we get to share all these conversations. But Kyle, for the next episode of the podcast, we're getting down to the nitty-gritty, and the next ones we'll be having some rookies on previewing. We're going to do an episode next year before the season kicks off and have a kayak angler, have a talking head in the sport, have a elite series we're going to have anglers and different people across the industry all come into a show to give their predictions for the year. So we're going to have a good, well-balanced prediction show. So we'll see how that goes in late January, early February. But until the next one, dude, I will see you later, man.